today for this telephone town hall to talk about the AARP Fraud Watch Network and steps you can take to protect yourself from frauds and scams. And for those of you watching online on Facebook or on YouTube, we welcome you as well. Now, we know that criminals use different scams to steal tens of billions of dollars from Americans each year. Those results are very devastating for the victims as well as their families who may lose their entire life savings. Now, the good news is that people who are aware of specific scams are much less likely to lose money. So please stay on the line as we take time to talk about the latest scams and the ways that criminals are targeting all of us, even here in Minnesota. So we're here today to talk about those proactive ways and measures that you can take to protect yourself. Share that information with your family and your loved ones and your friends to protect yourselves from identity theft and fraud through the AARP Fraud Watch Network. So this is an interactive call, and a big part of this effort is to have you join the conversation. This is very much like a radio call-in program. So all you have to do is press *3 on your telephone keypad at any time to be connected into one of our AARP staff members who will take your question and your name, find out where you're from, put you back in the queue so you can keep listening to that call. And then when you're ready, we'll ask you by name to share your question or your concern, and we'll get that call live. And if you are joining us on YouTube or on Facebook, we want those questions or comments in the comment section. So feel free to put those questions in the comment section, and we'll get those funneled into the call as well. So again, I'm Kathy McClear, the State Director for AARP Minnesota. I'm joined by Susan Adams-Lloyd from the Better Business Bureau of Minnesota, as well as Jay Hoppola, who is on our staff. And we'll get to those folks in just a minute. We do want to share with all of you, though, that the Fraud Watch Network gives you access to information and resources to protect yourself from scams and frauds. It's free and open to anyone of any age. You do not need to be an AARP member in order to participate. And we want you to grab a pencil and a piece of paper or a pen because we have such good information to share, as well as a number that you can call to join the Fraud Watch Network. Or if you have been a victim of a fraud or scam, we have a hotline that can help you through and help you navigate that very challenging time of reporting and getting your life back together. So again, the Fraud Watch Network is available to members and non-members alike. To sign up, you can call 1-877-908-3360, or you can visit our website, aarp.org/Fraud Watch Network. That's aarp.org/Fraud Watch Network. And on the website, you'll also find really good information about the latest scams and have a chance to share your stories on our scam tracking map. So again, if you are just joining us by phone or online, I'm Kathy McClear. This is a live discussion about fraud and identity theft. And as a reminder, this is an interactive call. You are a really important part of this conversation, and we want you to join the conversation. All you have to do is hit *3 on your telephone keypad, and you'll be put into a queue where one of our AARP staff members will take your name and your question, patch you back in to listen to the call until we're ready to take you live. So if you have a story about a fraud you've seen, if you have a question about how to protect yourself from fraud, we want to hear about it. So press *3 on your telephone keypad now when you're ready to share that question. And if you're online, put those questions in the comments, either on YouTube or on Facebook. We'll get to those as soon as we can. So sadly, we know that identity theft and other forms of frauds and scams pose a very serious threat here in Minnesota and beyond. We know that frauds and scams cause billions of dollars in losses every year, and AARP is mounting this local campaign to fight fraud by giving you valuable information to help you fight back and keep those criminals at bay. And again, for those of you who are joining us on Facebook or YouTube, we are coming to you from a television studio. We are at the Better Business Bureau of Minnesota and North Dakota, their headquarters right here in Burnsville, Minnesota. And we're so grateful that they have invited us to their lovely facilities here today. So I do want to introduce now Susan Adams-Lloyd, the President and CEO of Better Business Bureau of Minnesota and North Dakota. So Susan, thank you for having us in your space today and for being a really important part of this conversation.
Thanks, Kathy. Thanks, Jay, for coming. And thanks, to you listeners as well. I am a AARP member and participate in many of these calls, and I'm proud to invite you all here today to our studio. We at Better Business Bureau are a 110-year not-for-profit organization founded right here in Minnesota. So how appropriate we're holding this call here today. We provide extensive education to consumers like all of you, and our highly trained staff are here to help, as always, especially during trying times for the community, like during the pandemic, or trying times for individuals when they're going through a variety of transitions that make them very vulnerable to scams and fraud. We answer questions and provide connections, and most of it, to consumers is free to all. And by doing so, BBB fosters an ethical marketplace where buyers and sellers come together. And throughout our history, BBB has served the community through the worst of times, like the Depression and the recessions. But fraud prevention has been the one thing that has been consistent throughout the year, and especially to vulnerable populations, targeted individuals. BBB could not do the kind of work we do without partners like AARP, and collaboratively with you folks, with organizations like the IRS, the Minnesota Attorney General's Office, among others. We're united in our force to safeguard seniors, prevent scams, foil fraudsters. We're here to help you. BBB is not an enforcement agency, but boy, we have our ear to the ground, and we can be a resource to all of you and connect you with the law enforcement agencies that we communicate regularly to get you the services that you need. And we're blessed with very dedicated people. You know, sometimes I think people are somewhat shy about working with government agencies, and I can tell you there's really good people behind the scenes that are available to you and can make it very personable. So be sure to take down the information today and know that we're all here to help you. BBB is supported by generous contributions of more than 7,000 businesses. And I just want to say to the business owners and operators there, we have special education on fraud and scam prevention for all of you. You can find, whether you're a consumer or business owner, information at bbb.org. We offer all sorts of business profiles, and when you're looking for trusted, ethical business resources, that's a great place to start. But we'll talk about that in just a minute. So thanks so much for having us.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Susan, and thank you for being with us today and sharing your expertise and resources with all of our folks who are on the phone. So if you are on the phone with us today and you would like to ask a question of Susan or Jay at any time, please press *3 on your telephone keypad. If you are watching us online, please put your questions in the comment, and we will get to those just as quickly as we can as well. And the sooner you press *3, the sooner you will be online with our guest. Before we go any further, I need to introduce Jay Hoppola, who is on the AARP Minnesota team. So Jay, thanks for being here today.
Yes, thank you, Kathy and Susan, for the longstanding partnership that we've had. At AARP and our Fraud Watch Network program, we take hundreds and hundreds of fraud reports every single month. And we help people. So whether it's someone who's trying to navigate what they're seeing in their email inbox or as a text message, all the scams that we're targeted with every day, we help people sort those out. And then when folks have been victimized and they've actually lost money to fraud, we help them deal with that and all of the fallout that comes along with it. And almost like a side effect of helping all these people and taking their reports, we learn a lot and we get a lot of data and information about the latest scams. So we keep track of what type of scams are targeting people in Minnesota and across the country right now. Our volunteers here in Minnesota and elsewhere share that information with our own communities and people across the state as well as we can, because when people are aware of specific scams, they are much less likely to waste their time talking with criminals, and also much less likely to lose money to fraud and identity theft. So that's those are our goals, and that's how we work. And we'll spend the rest of the hour here today educating people and hearing from you about the scams that you're seeing across the state of Minnesota.
Great. Well, thank you, Jay. And as we like to say at AARP, if you can spot a scam, you can stop a scam. All right. Well, we're going to get to your calls and questions. If you would like to ask a question, please press *3 on your telephone keypad at any time. And we want to get those questions coming in. So hit *3, get those questions into the system. So while we're waiting for some folks to join the call, we have lots of folks joining the call, but while we get some questions on the line, Susan, I want to talk to you. We've had lots of storms here this summer in Minnesota. We've had severe weather, we've had flooding, and when disaster strikes, people just want to get their life back together. They want to get their repairs done. They want to get their home back to normal. How can people make sure that they're dealing with a reputable business when they start to hire those contractors and folks to help them with that task?
Well, you illustrate a point where we do need help and we are vulnerable, whether we've ever been in a vulnerable situation or not. A storm comes through, our roof comes off, maybe a tornado comes through the community, and it can really knock people on their heels. And it's those critical times that we always say, stop, look, and listen, because it's so surreal when you're facing a situation like that and you're dealing with a circumstance that you've never had to face before. So you become emotional. You're worried about, obviously, your personal safety. Perhaps your things are scattered about, or just the dealing with lots of water and hail damage can be upsetting and certainly knock you back on your heels. So one of the things that we always advise people when it comes to home repair, especially when you're inviting people into your personal space, is to check out the vendors that you're working with. Now, a lot of people show up on the scene ready to help, maybe an insurance adjuster or some of the local authorities that come through and have immediate recommendations. And of course, safety is number one concern. But there's also propensity for scam artists to follow those storms. And in fact, some of the worst scams that we've seen in our history comes from the kind of people that look like a legitimate party and they are there to help you when you need it and they have all just the right answers. But I would always caution people that regardless of the situation, trying to make a decision, especially a costly one, on the fly is never a good time to make a decision. And so people sometimes in trying to rectify a situation make it worse by quickly signing a contract or agreeing to a service or thinking, well, the Johnsons across the street are getting help from this vendor, I should get one too, especially since the guy said as long as I'm doing a roof, I could get a discount. So the timing of a situation is critical. So stop, get a second opinion. Certainly you can call bbb.org, or if you have electricity in those situations and can go online, bbb.org offers a variety, thousands of different vendors that you can call and call us if you need to. At the very least, we can connect you with some accredited businesses that we have that have been vetted. Yeah. But mostly my sage advice is slow it down, take a breath, and certainly go to trusted advisors and not just the first person that happens to be there when you need it.
Yeah. And Susan, the other thing that comes to mind, Minnesotans are very giving people, right? We want to help our neighbors. We want to do what we can to help someone else out. And when you see disasters like this or recovery efforts, there's a lot of charities that come out saying that they're raising money for this cause, another cause, maybe to help with the disaster recovery. How do folks know when the charity is legit?
Certainly, we see the same things. And I think oftentimes we see people who are well-intended, not necessarily meaning to be fraudsters or trying to dupe people out of their money. Sometimes they're very well-intended, but they just don't have the resources. And it's problematic because getting funds to the services and the people that need it are oftentimes a very complicated process that a grassroots charity might not have the means to do it or the proper format or finances to be able to push things along in a legitimate way. We always say, again, check it out, bbb.org. But this is where certainly the Secretary of State and the Attorney General's office are the best resources. So if you're wanting to know if an organization is legit, reach out to those organizations. But as well, we have an affiliation with an organization called the Wise Giving Alliance. And although that's not generally for the pop-up kinds of charities that might happen after a large disaster or a localized event. But I would say Wise Giving Alliance will help you look at the characteristics of a charity. And you might think, well, this is only $15-20. All you need to do is stroke a check and give somebody your bank numbers, and you could end up in the middle of a scam or scheme that you didn't even mean to be a part of. So stop, look, and listen. Take that extra step before you give generously as you can, but be cautious because You want to do good and do well at the same time, and especially for yourself by being generous and being careful at the same time.
Well, good advice, Susan. We appreciate that. You can also go to aarp.org/Fraud Watch Network. We also have a list of resources and ways that you can check out whether a charity is going to put your money to good use where you intend it to go. All right, before we get to a caller, and you can ask questions. We want to hear from you. Press *3 on your telephone keypad. I want to hear from Jay. Jay, what kinds of frauds and scams are we seeing really prevalent in Minnesota right now?
Right. We take hundreds of reports of different scams every week so we can monitor the trends. And in addition to these disaster relief type scams, there are definitely some top trends that we've been monitoring. Number one, it has to do with online retailers. So imposters are creating fake websites that might look like they're selling a good deal on a pair of shoes or some clothing or whatever it is people are shopping for online. But it could just be a fake website that isn't designed to send you anything. They're just collecting credit card payment information, personal information from their victims. So folks need to be aware about those and just be cautious. I like the idea of stop looking and listening, and before diving in to get a deal on an advertisement you see online, do some research behind the scenes to make sure that it's legitimate. But there's another side to the online retailers, and those are the emails that people receive in their inbox, and it looks like it is a receipt coming from a large retailer like Amazon or Walmart or Target or PayPal. And it says, "Thank you for your order. We have received it, and we are shipping the cell phone that you purchased, the expensive laptop that you purchased, and we're going to ship it to an address in a different state." And of course, this is alarming to people. They say, "Wait a minute, I didn't purchase a phone or a laptop." The email, which is produced by criminals and scammers, it gives a phone number that people can call to complain or get a refund for this mistaken transaction. And that's where the scam really begins, because instead of refunding any money, that's when they get the banking information and the payment information needed to steal the money in the first place. So at the beginning, it's only an email, but once a person sees moving image over the scammer's body as it moves. And so, in fact, there are cases in Minnesota where people thought they were really interacting with celebrities like Kevin Costner or Sandra Bullock, and they're really just talking to a criminal that appears to be a celebrity. The way they try to steal money is they say, if you donate to my charity, we are going to have a big event and I will fly you to Los Angeles, California, where we can meet in person. Often there's even a romantic edge to the way the scammers interact with their victims. And it really seems far-fetched, but people have to realize that these scams aren't logical. They're very emotional. And when someone is targeted by that, they can really have their better judgment short-circuited by these expert criminals.
Yeah, we hear that so often. And I think the phrase that the Fraud Watch Network likes to use is those criminals get you under the ether, right? They get you sort of in this heightened sense of emotion where you're ready to do anything because you're so excited that, ooh, this celebrity is talking to me. And that's a really hard thing to counteract. So thank you for bringing that really important information to us. All right, we want to get to your calls and questions. Hit *3 on your telephone keypad and you'll get into the queue. We have some AARP staff members who will take your question and we'll get you live on the call just as soon as we can. So let's go to my colleague, Erin Parrish, who is on the phones with us today and has some callers waiting to ask questions. Erin, who do we have with us?
Well, Kathy, our first question comes from Beth in Winona. Beth, you are live. Go ahead with your question.
Right. I have a family member who encountered someone either through TikTok or online chat who said they were a UNESCO volunteer at a school orphanage in Ghana, and they had this wonderful story about this orphanage, but they had taken under their wing a specific child who was extremely ill and needed money right away for important medicine. And so my spouse, being the caring person he is, sent money. And then, of course, this young woman kept chatting and chatting and chatting. And so he has now spent several $1,000s through Zelle payments going to somebody. So how do we, and she's given the name of a school and a location in Ghana and the director of the school, but how do I verify any of that? Because he doesn't, it's all emotional for him. He's now requested
Yeah.
a divorce and wants to move to Ghana. So what do I do?
Well, Beth, thank you for sharing that story. I think that's a really important thing to highlight is the way we can stop this, not only for ourselves and our families and others, our neighbors and other loved ones, is to share what's happening so that we're all aware of it. That is such a difficult situation to be in. So we really commend you for sharing your story and asking that question today. And I hope you'll stay on the line. At the end of this call, if you want to leave a voicemail for us, we can get you in touch with the AARP Fraud Watch Helpline, who can help you work through that process. But let's hear from Jay, and then we'll give Susan a chance to talk about it too on your specific situation.
Yeah, sounds like a very difficult situation. And that's something we hear all the time, that even when someone who's been sending money to a scammer is shown evidence, or people find out that it's a scam, it's hard for them to be convinced that it's not the true story that the scammer is telling, that there are needy people in a foreign country who are suffering and need charity support. So that can be very difficult. And it's very difficult for caregivers who are trying to intervene in those situations. And so we do hope that you'll stay on the line, and you'll have an opportunity to request a call back from us, and we'd love to help you work through that situation. But in general, just verifying those requests and knowing they're out there is a step in the right direction to keep ourselves and those that we love better protected from these scammers.
Yeah, and we'll get the number for our Fraud Watch Network helpline as well, where we have trained volunteers who can talk you through that process as well. Once you've reported a scam, and how to regroup after you've been through that.
And I just need to mention too, Beth, that you said the money was transferred through Zelle. If you haven't contacted your bank yet, do that immediately. There's some issues with consumer protections on these peer-to-peer payment systems, but nevertheless, you should report it to your bank and local law enforcement right away.
Absolutely. Susan, anything to add on that situation?
Well, it's tremendously sad, but unfortunately, like Jay said, we hear from callers almost every day. These scammers are good. They actually have marketing campaigns and personnel departments. They operate just like corporations. And I often say they're like magicians, where you don't realize that their skill and technique in distracting you or playing to your emotions on one side is as good as it is as they're picking your pocket, either virtually or literally. So it's not just an isolated case, it's over and over. And so oftentimes I hear from friends and family who say, well, that would never happen to me. And yet in my family, we've seen some tremendous examples of how very intelligent, engaged people can be slowly but surely over time scammed, and in some cases for large amount of money. So I just need to applaud Beth and the callers who do come forward, the people who do spend the time to share their stories, because if your antenna is not up right now, it should be, because it could happen to any of us. And it doesn't necessarily have to be from faraway places. It can be from someone down the street or across town, or even within your own network as well, that can dupe you out of a significant amount of money playing on your emotions.
Yeah. So thank you again, Beth, for sharing your story. And you or anyone else on the call, if you do have a concern or want to have some help from the Fraud Watch Network helpline, it's 1-877-908-3360. Again, that number is 1-877-908-3360. And we really have a tremendous team of volunteers who they've heard these stories before. They know how to help. They can help you navigate through this very difficult system process again. So thank you again for sharing your story. If you have a story to share or a question to ask, please press *3 on your telephone keypad, or if you're watching online, you can put those comments and questions in the comment section and we'll get those funneled through as well. Let's go to another caller. Erin, who do we have on the line?
Kathy, our next caller is Marie in Hutchinson, who experienced a recent scam that she would like to share. Marie, you are live. Go ahead with your question.
Well, I recently had a trip where my travel agent had uh, arranged for my tickets. And when I called a number, and I'm not sure how I got it, to verify the flight, I got, I got onto a scammer, I think. Well, I know it was. Anyways, what happened was is I gave her my credit card information, and she was paid. But she also took all of my grandson and my passport information. And I'm just wondering how concerned I should be about that information being out there. I did report it to the Department of Commerce, to the Sheriff's Office, and to the Attorney General. But my concern is what happens with that information that from our passports.
Yeah, well, thank you again for sharing that story. That's that's a tricky one. I know I've called my credit card company when I've either been notified of an erroneous charge or something, and I've misdialed something, and it's having that antenna up, like you said, Susan, where it didn't sound quite right when the credit card company said enter your card number, and I was able to hang up and then check the number again, and I realized I had misdialed, and that's a tricky thing to do. So Jay, any thoughts on passport security?
Sure. And I had a near miss or near experience with something like this too, starting on a hotel website that had a pop-up advertisement that instead of dealing with the hotel, we almost ended up dealing with this third party that could have been a scammer trying to steal our information. Certainly, if there would have been a passport involved. I'll highlight. It's you talk to the Department of Commerce, you talk to the Minnesota Attorney General's office, and I'll recommend that you look up a publication from the Federal Trade Commission called Identity Theft, a Recovery Guide. And that gives you a step-by-step of all what needs to be done to make sure that someone who has your passport information, perhaps social security numbers and other personally identifying information, will be stopped if they're trying to use it to do any number of damaging things that could be achieved with it.
Yeah. So Susan, I'll ask you this question before we move on to our next caller. If you've reported things and you know that your information has been out there, but you've reported it to all the right places, there are a number of companies that do identity theft or identity theft recovery. How does the Better Business Bureau handle those organizations? Do you work with any of them? Are there any that you recommend, or any advice on if you're going to use a service like that, how to make sure they're in good standing?
You can always look up the name of the company at bbb.org, and we do have ratings for those companies just like any other company, and I highly recommend it. My husband, because of a breach in 2014 of a previous employer, lost his Social Security number, and we have found ourselves in this odyssey every tax time that people have my husband's Social Security number and file taxes for us. And you would think, well, how nice is that, right? Well, they're trying to get alleged refunds that we don't have. We haven't lived in the 27 states that they have filed state income tax in, and that's been quite an interesting odyssey and a very common one. And so we're very vigilant about looking at our own identity. We happen to subscribe to LifeLock, but there's one of many, and I would say any of the number of the credit reporting services, you can pay an extra fee to do it. And I would say more information is good. To Jay's point, it's being vigilant. It's following all of those things, especially when you feel like you've been compromised. Even if you don't see any immediate results, we know at Better Business Bureau that scammers are patient. They're very methodical, and they'll sit on data for a long time. So it might not be when you lost your purse and all your credit cards in it. And don't ever carry your Social Security card in your purse, by the way, because that's something that we hear about. But it might be 6 months down the road with aggregate information that those databases are then sold on the dark web. And it creates all sorts of, again, knocking you back on the heel experiences because you're not expecting it. So it comes out of the blue when you suddenly get a ping on you get a something in the mail from a creditor that you didn't apply from, where it's too late because the scam has already occurred. So I would just say vigilance is always a good idea. And Jay, to the point, the FTC is a wonderful partner of ours as well. And then lastly, I would say that being forewarned is forearmed, and absolutely the more that you can learn, like these calls today. So thank you for joining us, but continue that to make yourself a little bit more savvy on what the processes are and how you can react. A common thing about scams is people are embarrassed, they go dark, they go under, and after 72 or 100 hours after a scam, it's a little late, but sometimes within that first few days, if you call your bank or call whoever has got your information allegedly and respond right away, sometimes the FTC and others can help you because there are certain laws in place to protect consumers. So I would say react as quickly as you can and then tell your family about it later. Don't be shy and don't wait to do it.
Yeah, I would second that. It's really important for folks to share their experiences so that others can learn from them. If you are just joining us, I'm Kathy McClear, the State Director for AARP Minnesota, and I am joined by Susan Adams-Lloyd with the Better Business Bureau of Minnesota and North Dakota, as well as Jay Hapala on our team, who leads our fraud outreach work, and information from the Fraud Watch Network. You can look online, get some of those additional resources that Susan's been talking about. We have other resources as well as a helpline. So if you find yourself in that situation, you can call the AARP Fraud Watch helpline. That number is 1-877-908-3360 to get assistance navigating that. We know we have lots of folks still on the line and callers still coming in. You can also put your questions and comments online if you're watching on Facebook or on YouTube, and hit *3 on your telephone keypad if you're listening on the phone to ask that question. So Jay, I'm going to go back to you for a second. So our state office and our volunteers work on policy issues as well as just our educational efforts around fraud. And last year, the Minnesota legislature, we advocated for several measures to help fight fraud, including trying to establish a restitution fund. So talk a little bit about what we got passed and how folks might want to get involved in the future.
In 2024, so earlier this year, our volunteers and our teammates at AARP Minnesota worked in the Minnesota legislature to pass two very important consumer protections that are now the law in our state. So we're very happy to get some new protections against real estate scams in Minnesota. Right now, or previously, these brokerage firms could target especially lower income homeowners and different people who were in distress and needed some quick cash. They would offer them very low amounts of money in exchange for the other key consumer protection we were able to achieve this past year is regulations on these new cryptocurrency ATM machines that are popping up in gas stations and grocery stores across our state. So you might have noticed them for yourselves, but just right next to the cash ATM or the banking ATM machine in these convenient locations have popped up kiosks or ATM machines where people don't take cash out, they put cash in, and the machine converts it into cryptocurrency, which can be instantaneously sent around the world with very little chance of tracing where that money has gone. So when these systems were being invented, we had very little regulations on them. Now, and by the way, this isn't scams affecting people who want to invest in cryptocurrency or try to make money off the cryptocurrency market. These are scam victims who are on the phone being told their bill payment is late or their grandchild is in distress and needs money sent right away. And the scammers groom them and train them to go to the gas station and put their cash into the machine. So now we have protections that people have a 14-day grace period on those payments when they turn out to be fraudulent, and they're reported. The fraud is reported to law enforcement as well as the cryptocurrency kiosk operator. And there are also some limits on the amount of money that a new customer can put into the machine right away, limiting the risk of someone losing, their whole life savings, hopefully, when they make a mistake using these machines. And finally, they have to post warning signs on those machines. So those are some important achievements we made last year, but I also want to highlight a work in progress, and we need everyone's help with this issue. So next year, we intend to create in Minnesota a restitution fund for fraud victims. So when someone does lose their life savings or they lose a very significant amount of money, they just need some help to pay the bills and stay on their feet so they don't lose their home and have enough food to eat and can start to recover from being victimized and losing so much money. And this wouldn't be a new tax on all of us. Instead, these funds would come from the lawsuits that our attorney general, or the settlements our attorney general generates with legitimate companies who have broken the law and need to pay fines. So that could fund uh, this new restitution fund for people who've been victimized and could use some help to stay on their feet. And what we'd like to invite you to do right now, if you have a fraud story and you would be willing to share it with decision makers, with us and others who need to learn how important these issues are and how many fraud victims and the impacts that they face when they are victimized by these criminals, press 1 on your telephone right now, or enter it on chat if you're online. But press 1 on your phone right now if you'd be willing to talk with us. We'll follow up with you after the call here. We'll give you some time over the phone to tell us your story, and it could be instrumental in our ability to create this restitution fund in Minnesota and help fraud victims in the future.
Yeah, much like Beth shared and Marie shared, it's really important to share those stories, because that's how we can demonstrate to lawmakers and decision makers that this is a really important thing and that people are really struggling as a result of being victimized. So thank you for that. You talked a little bit about payment type, right? So the cryptocurrency scam, when someone says you need to pay me by cryptocurrency, go put some money in this crypto ATM. There's another catch, right? There's another form of payment that scammers are frequently using. So talk about that.
Sure. So the number one job for any scammer, even before stealing your money, is to stay hidden. If we could trace these payments, if we could trace the location of the scammer, well, then it wouldn't be so difficult for our law enforcement to track them down and arrest them. So in the effort to remain anonymous and untraceable, scammers demand certain types of payments. Cryptocurrency is one of them. The peer-to-peer payments are one of them, because there's some complication in the consumer protections around those. Cryptocurrency, difficult to trace. They also want to be paid with gift cards. So the most difficult and impossible to trace type of payment is definitely the gift cards that scammers are demanding. And they'll take your cash too, because we know that you couldn't trace a dollar bill from person to person and know that whose it was to begin with. So the number one red flag, I say, to recognize a scam is that if they're telling you you must pay with cryptocurrency, with peer-to-peer payments, with gift cards, with cash, those are the biggest red flags.
All right. Thanks for sharing that really valuable information. All right. If you have questions, hit *3 on your telephone keypad, and we will get to those just as soon as we can. We do have a little bit of time left. And let's see who's on the line now. Erin, who's our next caller?
Our next caller is Michael in Roseville, who has a question about spoofing of caller ID. Michael, go ahead live with your question.
Yes, my question or comment is caller ID. The companies can spoof that, and I'd like our government to lean on the phone companies to prevent that, because you get a call coming in from, personally, I got one from Bethesda Hospital. And I thought, well, the worst, that somebody in my family was in the hospital, and it turned out to be a scammer. So why can't we make it impossible for these guys to spoof caller ID?
Yeah, that's a great one, and it's very problematic. And I hope that when we dialed out to all of you today that AARP showed up on your phone, but we know that also folks are trying to use our name, maybe the Better Business Bureau, in order to present themselves as someone they're not. So Susan, can you talk about the spoofing?
Sure. The spoofing is very complicated because it's combined in all sorts of local and federal laws and protections for both the companies and for consumers. So I would say, just as a general practice, that you, as hard as it is, I'm a caregiver for elderly people, and I know that when my phone rings, I like to answer it because it could be urgent, but I tend to let things roll to voicemail. And again, it allows me to take a moment to really look and understand, perhaps if I'm by a computer, even look up to see who that phone number might be and whether it's legitimate. And so slowing the stop, look, and listen. But I would say that if you have any concerns about spoofing, and it happens regularly, I would call your cell phone provider and see what filters that you can put in, ways that you can block the call. And I would also strongly encourage people to not feel like they can fight crime on their own by reaching out to those scammers or those spoofers and trying to, tell them where to go and all that stuff, because that just creates an engagement. So one of the greatest things that you can do to get off besides the do not call list, is to not answer the call, because once you've answered the call or acknowledged it in any ways, again, you go on that list where you then become part of a database that a scammer, although they might not reach you initially, may resell your information. Mm-hmm. So be very, very cautious. But I would start with your cell phone provider, and many of which have responded to the advocacy of such organizations like AARP. Better Business Bureau does not do any advocacy work, but we support those organizations to do. And I know the FTC is very, very keenly focused on the spoofing and the scams that are done through those methodologies.
Yeah, another great way is if you know that it's not somebody you know, or you know that it's been a scam, just block that caller on your phone. Jay, anything to add on that? And then I have a question for you about caregivers and how caregivers can support help protect their loved ones. But spoofing first?
Well, right. Great advice from Susan. In addition, if all of you out there have noticed on your cell phones that for the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, you get notice on many calls that it's likely spam or a likely scam, and it gives you notice. The reason for that is we passed federal laws that required the telecom companies to use the latest technology to alert their customers when a call could be a scam or if it's an illegal robocall. All of those regulations did not all happen 4 or 5 years ago. So even there's a new phase coming by the end of 2024 that will cause the industry to be screening out more and more of these calls. So I know it's cold comfort for all of you who your phone rings 20 times a day from all these scammers. But it's a work in progress to limit the amount of illegal robocalls.
Excuse me. Just wanted to add that if you need additional information on how to do some of these things and how to get off on the do not call list so that they're not calling you, or how to block callers on your phone, you can do that at the Fraud Watch Network. Jay, you want to talk about that while I get a drink of water?
Sure. Yeah, you can call us. And this makes it so much easier than answering everyone's question. Any time during business hours, you can call our Fraud Watch Network at 877-908-3360, or you can go online to get the same information at aarp.org/fraudwatchnetwork.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, Erin, let's go to one more caller.
Great. Kathy, our next caller is Michael in Andover, who has another question related to policy regarding penalties for scammers. Michael, go ahead with your question.
Great, thank you. One quick comment is one thing that I found beneficial with my credit card companies. Many of them offer where they'll send you a notification literally seconds after there's a transaction done. And so we've been able to stop some things where people have fraudulently used our cards, and which then means we haven't lost any money or any of those types of things. So I'd suggest that for people. But my other thing is, between my wife and I, we've had probably a dozen companies that we regularly do business with, from healthcare to our credit card companies, banks and things like that, that have had breaches, and so they've notified us of that. And so I'm aware that some of our information is out on the dark web and that type of thing. Just not sure what happens to those people if and when. I know they're not always, often aren't caught, but if they are caught, what's happening so that it's less of a smart business plan for them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So thanks for sharing your tip on how to keep your information safe with your credit cards. That's a great one. Jay or Susan, Jay, you want to start with thoughts on?
I can speak to a little bit about that. That's why so many of the scammers are out of the U.S., because some of the laws don't apply, and that's unfortunate. And that's why, again, being as safe as you can up front and having those things, as Michael just mentioned. I have a $500 limit on, for example, my debit card. I don't use it for many transactions that involve purchases like online because I'm nervous about it, but I've purposefully put that in there. And as Michael said, within seconds, I'm aware of stuff that happens, and I do review my purchases online and my bill regularly. And that is, you've got to lean into this situation because letting the cat out of the bag is, it's problematic. And I would say we know in working with the FBI and the Federal Trade Commission, we have close association with law enforcement agencies that together in consortium go after these guys. But not all countries are as proactive. And when information or currency leaves the US, it sometimes falls into this space where it's really nobody's responsibility. And unfortunately, they morph into something else, or they might, even if the bad guy gets caught, he might be or she might be part of a whole syndicate or a cartel. And unfortunately, some of these are extremely sophisticated. So I don't want to make people afraid, just aware that the best thing that you can do is have the fewest number of credit cards, fewest number of places where your address or social security number or passport numbers are shared, and then monitor them carefully in a proactive way, a regular way, so it becomes familiar to you and you're not in the middle of a crisis when you're trying to figure out how that stuff works.
Yeah, and what was your phrase? Stop, listen.
Stop, look, and listen.
Stop, look, and listen.
Take a breath, look at the situation. When someone tells you to pay with gift cards, I know they got you at a moment where it made sense, but do you really pay the IRS with gift cards? I don't think so, right? So stop, look, and then listen to what the repeated instructions, because as Jay was saying, we get groomed in those situations to follow, almost like we're in a trance, and we don't even know that we're being hypnotized to do. So the more time that you can give yourself to let your rational brain think about what you're being asked to do, the more likelihood that you'll make a good decision, and that is not follow through with a scammer's orders.
Yeah. And I'll add one more instruction to that: verify. Always verify. So if the IRS calls you on your phone and wants you to pay with a credit card or with a gift card, hang up, find the number for your local IRS office, reach out to them. You make the phone call so you know you're talking to someone who is from the IRS or the Social Security Administration. So
I love that advice.
Always verify. Always verify.
Absolutely. I've got to call you back. Is there a number? And it might not be the number that Kathy, they gave you. It might be the one that you find online, or again, call AARP Fraud Watch Network, call BBB, and we'll get you to the right people, because chances are that transaction doesn't need as much immediate attention, and you can verify it. That's an excellent point.
Don't call the number back that they called you on. Don't call the number they give you. You find independently the number that you need to call in order to verify that transaction. Jay, anything else on Michael's question?
Yeah, so Michael's right. We need stiff deterrence on criminals who are caught, perpetrating these crimes and victimizing people. But the hard part in these scams is tracing anyone, whether they're coming from overseas or whether they're using technology or the payments that I described earlier to make sure that the criminals can't be found. That's the real challenge for our law enforcement and investigators. But it's a real challenge for us as Americans, I think, too, because we want to have the freedom to buy gift cards and make telephone calls without verifying our identity, and to send emails with a free internet where you can contact people. So with that, the criminals are going to have access to the same type of technology and the same type of freedoms. That's why being educated and informed of all these different types of scams is so important.
Yeah, good advice. All right, Erin, let's go to one more caller and see who we have on the line with us today.
Great. Our next caller is Mary in St. Paul, who has a question about a lost driver's license. Mary, you are live. Go ahead with your question.
Okay. I checked when I lost my driver's license. It was in the parking lot of a grocery store. So when I realized it, I turned right around, went back. Of course, it wasn't laying outside. I think I dropped it when I opened up my trunk. And so I went in and I asked the manager of the store, did anybody turn in? Nobody turned it in. I asked the business gal that sits there and does things, for people when they come in. She said nobody had turned in a driver's license. What do I do?
That's a great question. I think we've all been in that situation where we've either lost our wallet, lost our purse, left our purse somewhere, and you come back and your wallet and your driver's license is gone. So, Susan, anything from you?
Yeah, I would go right to the county and get a new driver's license. Again, they have a wonderful program to help ensure that your driver's license is safe, and you need that, especially just as a form of ID. And we know now to travel, you need the newer driver's license anyways to be able to travel via air travel and maybe train travel. So I would go right away to the county as quickly as you can. And sometimes that's a pain. That's unfortunate because the time that it takes, the focus that it takes, but it's an investment of security and will probably preclude any kind of issues that you might have by somebody trying to use that identification for nefarious purposes. But I would rectify that as quickly as possible, and then you don't have to worry as much. I would say our information is out there, so whether it's scammers that are taking or just old systems that aren't secure, our information is out there. And I'll just say one more time, to be a regular, vigilant observer of your own identity before you have issues is probably, it just creates good habits. And you might find some old things that aren't closed, old credit cards and whatnot. That's probably old IDs that aren't good. It's a good time to clean that up. So perhaps for the next few days, people take the time to kind of reconcile all that information as best you can and just feel like you can sleep better at night.
Yeah, good advice. Jay, any thoughts on a lost driver's license?
I'll recommend, once again, the Federal Trade Commission's Identity Theft Recovery Guide. It will give you each step that needs to be taken. Having your driver's license stolen is not the same as having your social security number and much more information, perhaps some of your financial account data. But that recovery guide is available from the Federal Trade Commission for free. You can ask to have a hard copy mailed to you, or you can download it online just the same.
So, Jay, I want to go back to one thing. Susan talked about you're a caregiver, you care for elderly individuals. Many of us are caregivers. We have a lot of caregivers in the state of Minnesota who might be either, just running errands for someone or monitoring their medications or maybe helping with their finances. Any words for caregivers if they notice some unusual activity with their loved one?
Right. So that's how often families discover that one of their loved ones is being victimized, is that they're no longer able to pay the bills on time. They're very secretive about their cell phone transactions and interactions. You might even see a pile up of mail on the dining room table. So there are plenty of signs, and people can learn about them through the Fraud Watch Network. But even before that, I think there's just a real issue that a lot of us have with leading busy lives and being isolated from each other more than we have in the past. And that really plays into what the scammers need to victimize people. When people are isolated and alone, the scammers can use their expertise to get people to have an emotional response, sort of short circuit their better judgment, and start sending money. So if you have enjoyed this program today, it could be a conversation starter for you and your family to start to talk about these issues. And it's not just for your older parents or siblings or the older people in your life. In fact, the data shows that younger people are being victimized and losing money more often than older people today. Believe it or not, because we've had this out of date belief about older people being more vulnerable. In fact, it's the young people today. And I think that's a way that grandparents and parents can really play a leadership role by being educated about these issues. You're the type of people that grew up delaying your mail deliveries and newspaper deliveries and making sure no one knew you're on vacation. Mm-hmm. You know about what it takes to keep your family safe, and you can continue to play that role with the young people in your life who are very much at risk for all of these scams.
Good points to make. Wow, that hour goes really, really fast. So, on behalf of AARP Minnesota, I want to thank everyone who took part in today's conversation, whether you were on the phone or joined us online or on YouTube. Um, this has been really fascinating, and we've had such wonderful information from both of our guests today. So, as we near the end of our call, I just want to give our guests a chance to have some final thoughts. So, Jay, anything else that you would like to share with folks before we close?
Yeah, it goes back to Michael's question a little bit about what the service that his bank offers. That's my first advice. I mentioned earlier the red flags about the payments that are being demanded. But the first step that folks ought to take to protect their money is to be monitoring their financial accounts and reporting unauthorized transactions to those financial institutions as soon as they see them. And that's going to cover a large proportion of your liability for any losses due to fraud. So I'll just say thanks to everyone here, to all our listeners, and I hope you continue the conversation with the people you care about.
Thank you, Jay. And Susan, again, thank you for having us in your
you.
Better Business Bureau studio. This is a lovely place to be, and we're grateful for your collaboration as well. So, any final thoughts to share?
Well, this hour did go fast, and it is a lovely place to be. I always enjoy working with AARP, and I especially am heartwarmed by the number of people who are on this call today. I would like people to think about scam prevention as a positive thing. I know when we hear scam and fraud, we tend to want to hide, especially from the bad guys, but I would like to knight everybody's here as being ready to go out and help others get excited about scam prevention education. It's something that's always changing. The information is always new and relevant, but by being interested and leaning into this, not only can you protect yourself, you can encourage others to do the same. And we hear, especially from people who've been scammed before, that somehow it's cathartic to help each other. Don't wait to be scammed before you can help yourself and help others. I always say put your oxygen mask on first before assisting others. So we do that here at BBB. And know that we're always a free service for you. We have a friendly staff that wants to help you, and we're available all throughout North America. So any interaction that you have, either in Minnesota, North Dakota, or wherever, we're here to help. So give us a call or check us out online at bbb.org. So thank you, Kathy and Jay.
Love that. A whole new batch of deputized fraud fighters. So that's great to have. All right. Well, whether it's by phone, through the mail, or online, or at your front door, criminals continue to invent new ways to steal our money. But the good news is you can protect yourself by being educated and aware of their scams. We encourage anyone on the phone or online to join the AARP Fraud Watch Network. It's a great way to learn the most effective ways to protect yourself and your loved ones. And if you haven't had a chance to sign up yet, it's easy to do. You can call our Fraud Watch helpline for free, 1-877-908-3360. And you can add your address to the Fraud Watch Network mailing list. That's 1-877-908-3360. And if it's easier to sign up online, you can visit our website at aarp.org/fraud watch network. We've had many great questions and stories from the audience. If we couldn't get to you, we encourage you to stay on the line. You can leave us a voicemail, or if you need some extra help dealing with the situation, we can help you through that again. And you can get great information from the AARP publications or on our website at aarp.org/fraud watch network. Thanks for joining us today, and have a wonderful day.